Hi there, it's Lara here. I'm back. Welcome to Witchy Wednesday. Welcome to 2020, a whole new year, a whole new decade, a whole new paradigm, right? The gateway to a whole new world, really. It's been quite the entrance into 2020, hasn't it? When you're looking at things on a global scale, maybe it's felt like that in your own personal life too, depending on what's going on for you specifically. But we can definitely see how we've entered this decade. All we have to do is, spend a few seconds scrolling Facebook, watching the news, whatever. And if you've been avoiding doing all of that, good on you. If that's what you need to do right now, then that's, perfectly okay. But the good news is this is one of the most intense sort of periods of the whole year. We are being bookended by some pretty significant astrological events in 2020. So I'm going to talk about that. There's a lot to cover in this video. This, in all likelihood, will be a two-part video this time around because there's a lot to say and I don't want to rush through it. So you may be wondering at the end, like, why didn't she talk about the signs? And if that's the case, I'll do that in part 2 and I'll put the link to that below for easy access. Okay. But I just want to warn you that that's probably going to happen. Before I begin anything else, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me here, for subscribing. I picked up some new subscribers over the holidays. I do appreciate that. And for your engagement with the videos and your interest in my readings, which I've been pretty busy with these days, I'm happy to say. So if you have ordered a reading from me, then please hang tight. I promise it's coming. It's just taking a little while to get through them because I do have quite a few on my plate right now. And if you're interested in getting a reading, then click the link below to my website and you can go check out what's on offer over there. All right. I also want to say thanks for your patience. I took a few weeks off over the holidays and I warned you that I was going to do that. So thank you for waiting for me and for returning now that I'm back, and we'll carry on as per usual every Wednesday here. This particular video is covering the week of January 8th to 14th, 2020, but it goes beyond that because the events that are occurring this week are rippling out into the months ahead. And they've actually been building as well in 2019 and even, back into 2018, some as well. So we're reaching sort of the climax of a lot of this energy, and we're going to cover that in today's video. Before we do that, let's just take a deep breath, shall we? I feel like I needed that. Maybe you needed it too. That is really the single quickest way I know to kind of, stabilize everything and come back to the present moment. So before I dive into the astrology, there's something that I just want to say to you. And I wrote about this on Facebook and on Instagram last week, but in case you didn't catch that, I want to mention it here too. I also want to say to you, if you haven't visited me on Facebook and Instagram, then it would be great if you did that. The links to those are always below. I do more regular posts there. And so, if you're interested in that, you can come join me and the rest of us over there. But if you're not, this is what I want to say to you, if you're not feeling particularly fired up just yet, right? It's a new year, and our sort of societal conditioning tells us that we should set resolutions and we should, jump into the new year with unbounded enthusiasm and taking on all kinds of things and big changes and all of this. But if you're not feeling it, I want you to know that you are in perfect alignment with the cycles of nature. Because on the wheel of the year, right, which is based on ancient pagan traditions, it's called the witch's wheel of the year, the Celtic wheel of the year. But essentially it reflects, it represents the cycles of nature and how ancient peoples celebrated certain spokes on the wheel, or festivals, turning points, this kind of thing. And people back in the day were much more in tune with natural cycles, with the rhythms of the moon, with the rhythms of nature in general, and the seasons. And so if you're feeling like like everybody's telling me, all the commercials and all the things, all the pop-ups on social media, and the people at work are telling me that it's they're starting these big new whatever exercise regimes, these big new life changes. They're just super enthusiastic, jumping on the New Year's bandwagon, and I'm not feeling it. It's okay. It's really not where you're supposed to be right now if you are in accordance with nature and the natural cycles. And for me, it's really the only thing that makes sense. You do you. I mean, if you're all about New Year's resolutions, go for it. But I'm saying, if you're not feeling it, don't beat yourself up over it. We are at this point in the Northern Hemisphere where I live, where we're in the depths of winter, right? Nature is slumbering right now. She's resting. She's not super active. She's in a very yin phase right now, as opposed to a yang, outward sort of motion phase. So we're at this point, and I thank various teachers like Sharon Blackie, for example, or also Mari Kennedy. Sorry, it took a moment for that name to rise. Women that teach about these things that I've been following and reading for a while. They talk about this time of year being the time of year for dreaming and visioning and just contemplating and receiving the wisdom, right, of our hearts, that quiet wisdom of our hearts and souls. And when we come upon that time of year that on the wheel of the year is known as Imbolc, or Bridget's Day, or Candlemas, Groundhog Day, right, in more sort of secular ways, like we most of us are familiar with Groundhog Day, which happens February 2nd. So Imbolc takes place around that time, the beginning of February 1st, 2nd. And that is the time when we can really set our intentions and commit to them. But right now, we're still in the dream phase, the visioning phase, if you will, the receiving phase. So take your cues from nature, right? And you'll feel less sort of pressured, perhaps, more in the flow, more at ease, more okay with where things are at and with how you're feeling. And one of the ways to begin doing that, and to bring that sort of practice of aligning with the natural cycles into daily life, is working with the moon. You've heard me mention this before. It's a practice that I've been doing for a while, and I'm more and more and more sort of committed to it as time goes on, and realizing how powerful it is. And so I've made this free guide to working with the moon that you can get over on my website. You just have to put in your email address, and you will get an email with the download to both an audio and just a one-page PDF that will get you started in your own life with working with the cycles of the moon. And as I mentioned before, working on more of that to bring to you in the coming year. So stay tuned. But I really wanted to talk about that because I think it's really important. We really can feel pressured at this time of year. And, again, if you're not feeling it, it's okay. You're right where you need to be. All right. So moving on, We have a lot to cover when we're talking about the astrology, so let's get on with it. I mentioned to you that 2020 is kind of like this gateway to a whole new world. And the analogy that comes to mind is of the butterfly, right? And I've used this before, and lots of people have used it before to talk about this notion of transformation and metamorphosis. I did a little research on this because I wanted to know some of the details. And it turns out that caterpillars can stay in their cocoon for anywhere from like 5 to 21 days. So it's not a set standard time for every caterpillar to become a butterfly or a moth. So we are all at varying stages right now of that transformation or metamorphosis. We're all going through the same process, but we're at different stages of the journey. So some of us, are still kind of in the butterfly soup, right? Some of us are perhaps in the final stages of metamorphosis where we are forming into that butterfly or moth in the cocoon. Some of us are just emerging and kind of getting our bearings to the way the world looks to us now and the way we look out in the world, and how we experience the world. Some are just kind of like cleaning off the gunk and getting ready to stretch our wings. And some of us are, just ready to full on take flight kind of thing. And some will remain caterpillars till the bitter end, metaphorically speaking, until they either kind of die because they've resisted the process, or there's been some major malfunction or dysfunction, or until they just can't resist it any longer. I discovered that there's actually one species of caterpillar that can stay a caterpillar up to 15 years before it actually transforms. So see what I'm saying? We're all at different stages on this journey, but we're all undergoing that process in some way, shape, or form. So I'm going to break down the different pieces of the puzzle that are happening for you. And I'm going to show you the chart as per usual. And eventually I'm going to get to talking about a couple of these significant events and how they're playing out, the area of life that they're touching on for each of us. I'll give you a list of what I'm going to talk about quickly first before I start going in. So obviously we've got a lunar eclipse happening this weekend, right? In general, is huge in the astrology. We have a lunar eclipse happening on Friday, and that's in the sign of Cancer. On the same day, we have Uranus stationing direct. We also have Eris stationing direct. We have, on Sunday, Saturn and Pluto are finally coming into perfect conjunction. This big deal we've been talking about all year. The event is happening on Sunday the 12th, the exact event. And there are other things. There are tons of planets in Capricorn many that are right around that same area of the chart. We will have, Mercury passing over that area. We'll have the sun passing over that area. We have Jupiter there. So lots and lots going on. All right. So these are the things that we're going to focus on in this video. So again, it may be a two-parter because lots to say and lots more to say. First thing I'm going to start with is what's happening today, which is the 8th of January. We have Jupiter conjuncting the south node of the moon. So I think I'm going to pause here and show you the chart before I dive in to give you some visual context. Now, here's the chart for this eclipse and the Saturn-Pluto conjunction and Uranus stationing direct. Eris stationing direct. Okay, so first thing you're going to notice is all these red lines and there. Okay. So, and then you're going to notice this massive pileup of energy in the sign of Capricorn. There's so much there that this is so small, I don't even know if you can see it. But you can see, I'm going to try to point this out to you. We have the south node of the moon. We have we have Jupiter, sorry. We have the sun. We have Mercury. We have asteroid Ceres. We have Saturn, Pluto. And here is Chariklo, a planetary body known as a centaur. I may have touched on her briefly before. She is the wife of Chiron. I'm going to speak briefly about her later on in the video, but she's there too, right close to Saturn and Pluto and Ceres. And then, as I said, Mercury and the sun will pass over here as well. And eventually, later on in 2020, at the end of the year, Jupiter is going to conjunct Saturn, which is another huge astrological event. And Jupiter will have this dance with Pluto over the course of the year as well, coming into conjunction, moving out because of the retrogrades a few times. So that's why I was saying to you that the events that I'm talking about today are not just specific to this week, right? So all of that's going on in Capricorn. Down here, this opposition, right, all these red lines, is with the full moon in Cancer at 20 degrees. North Node is also in Cancer at 8 degrees there. And then we've got Eris, which I'm going to mention in this video, at 23 Aries, making a square to all of this energy. Conversation of tension. We have Uranus in Taurus right here at 2 degrees going to station direct on the same day as the eclipse. So today, Uranus is still retrograde, but it's stationing direct, right? So the energy is going to be amplified when a planet stations direct. Just like Eris is going to do the same thing. We have Neptune making a sextile to this energy, so that's some support there. And Uranus is making a trine to all of this energy, which is also a supportive conversation, right? A conversation of greater ease. But there's a lot of tension in the chart. There's a lot of friction in the chart, definitely. But there are some things that will help smooth this out a little. All right, so I was talking to you about Jupiter conjuncting the south node. I have my notes here. That's why I keep looking down, in case you're wondering. Jupiter conjuncting the south node is encouraging us to kind of examine how far we've come. Look how far we've come. What have we learned from the past, right? The south node represents the past, in a sense, what we're well-versed in, our default, our comfort zone, even if it's not that comfortable anymore. It can represent past experiences, past ways of being, past lives even. It is ultimately what we need to learn from and move away from if we're to evolve to, the kind of highest version of ourselves in this lifetime, as an individual and as a collective. And that's what the North Node in Cancer is pointing us towards, the direction that we are being encouraged to go in, right? So the South Node is about the past. And so Jupiter is saying, look how far we've come. What have we learned from the past? Or perhaps we will choose to learn nothing, right? To kind of just sit in the past, to cling to the past, to expand. Jupiter expands things on whatever kind of dysfunction or old patterns or fears or struggles that we are used to, that we've been living in or dealing with or clinging to or defaulted to in the past. This is like, will we learn from the consequences of our past actions? Or will we cling to the old way, right, of doing things that's familiar to us because we're afraid of the new, perhaps? Ultimately, it's our choice, but we're really being encouraged to, and ultimately, you know, Jupiter is a benefic. It's a planet of optimism and expansion and growth. And so I think what Jupiter really wants us to do is say, thank you for these lessons. I'm going to grow from them. I'm not going to cling from them. So that's my take on it. The next thing we have going on is January 10th. We've got a lunar eclipse at 10 degrees of Cancer. I may have said 20 degrees, I don't know, but it's at 10 degrees of Cancer. So an eclipse, right, a lunar eclipse in particular, is the light of the moon being overshadowed for a moment. Earth blocks the sunlight from reaching the moon because the moon reflects the light of the sun. And so Earth blocks this light, and, you know, the moon may have a red tinge at this time. And like all lunar eclipses, this is a full moon. So it's a full moon in Cancer, and it's a lunar eclipse. Full moons are associated with the rising of the tides, right? The moon rules the tides. The moon rules the water. Humans are made largely of water, I will remind you. And so the moon rules our emotions, our feelings, our instincts, our subconscious. And the moon at the time of this full moon and this eclipse is in its home sign of Cancer. The moon rules the sign of Cancer. So this kind of amps up the energy, this Cancer energy, this moon energy, right? Cancer is the nurturer. The sign of the crab. We know Cancer to be the sign of the crab, but recently I learned that an ancient symbol for the sign of Cancer are two spirals. So showing the process of evolution, which I think is really interesting, being as the North Node, which speaks to our soul's evolution, right? Our individual North Node in our birth chart points to our individual soul's evolution, but collectively the North Node is in Cancer right now. So talking about the evolution of our collective soul, right? In Cancer, the sign of the nurturer, the ancestors, our tribe, our home, our family, our homeland, our sense of emotional safety and security. So full moons, as we know, can be very emotional times, right? Full moons in general, just a regular old full moon, is a time when things come to a precipice. They reach a culmination point. They come to fruition. There's a release. There is a sudden awareness. Things come to light. Things reach their full capacity, kind of thing. And so our emotions, right, the rising of the tides, well, our emotions are sort of like those internal tides, can bubble up to the surface and make us very aware of things that may have been buried in our subconscious, may not have been consciously aware of. So because it's a lunar eclipse, this amplifies that even more. And it can be a really emotional time. This full moon is known as the wolf moon. And that made me think of, like, you know, if that symbol of the wolf howling at the moon, right? That eerie guttural sound that a wolf makes when they are emoting in some way. So some of us may find ourselves howling at the moon at this time, around the time of this full moon lunar eclipse. It may feel like a massive release, a massive clearing of emotions that have been pent up for so long. If we've been allowing ourselves kind of to feel these emotions and to work with them up until now, then it may be a little less intense. And of course, it depends on where this is falling in your chart, right? We're going to get to that. But if we've been really kind of holding it all in, the floodgates could burst at this time, and that's okay. It needs to happen. So something to be aware of. And keeping in mind, emotions run the gamut, right? Emotions can feel very joyful, uplifting, or they can be really kind of intense and painful. So this can be a release of emotions on any number of levels. The eclipse is happening in the sign of Cancer, and like I showed you on the chart, it's opposite all of that Capricorn energy. So this is not new energy for us, this energy in Capricorn. We've been building and building and building to this all through 2019 and even previous to that. This axis of Cancer Capricorn has been repeatedly triggered, right? Over the last 12 to 18 months. We've already had a couple of eclipses here, and we've had a lot of other planetary events in this looming conjunction of Saturn-Pluto. So if we've been paying attention, then the events that kind of come to the precipice now won't necessarily be a huge surprise to us, right? In fact, again, it may feel like relief in some ways, like a release. Even if it's not all rainbows and unicorns, it's like, okay, finally, here we go kind of thing. It's, to use a bit of a gross analogy, I suppose, it's like when there is a wound. I think I've used this analogy before, and there's infection brewing, but the infection has nowhere to go because the wound has closed up already. It's like when you open that wound and the infection all comes out, right? The gross stuff, the gunk, the pus, then the wound can heal properly. So it's kind of like this wound that's been festering for a long time, and now it's opening up, and out comes all the toxins, and we can begin the process of proper healing. So the Capricorn Cancer axis that you've heard me talk about this before, if you've been around for a while, is this axis of security. So on the one end, we have Capricorn representing ultimately the material or practical security, right? And Cancer on the other end representing our emotional security. They are two sides of the same coin, these two opposite signs. This is also known as the axis of parenting. So this balancing between sort of like the nurturer and the authoritarian, right? The divine masculine and the divine feminine. To put it in simpler terms, sort of the mother energy and the father energy. That doesn't necessarily speak to gender, though. I just want you to know that. Like, it doesn't speak to men and women necessarily, because Capricorn is actually a feminine sign. It's a feminine earth sign. So it is this more yang receptive energy, even though it is very ambitious and driven in a sense. Driven is perhaps the wrong word to use. It is determined to reach the precipice, right? But it does that in a more yin way, particularly if we're harnessing the highest vibration of Capricorn energy. I spoke about this in the last video I did just before the holidays about Capricorn being the symbol of the sea goat, which speaks to the fact that it's not just about the material. It's about us being spiritual beings living in this human world, having a human experience, right? Both are acceptable, both are necessary, both are okay. That's the Capricorn energy in a nutshell. And so I spoke about that last week, or not last week, but the last video that I did. So you can go have a listen to that if you're curious. But again, when we're talking about this axis of security, the material, practical versus the emotional security, we tend in our society to focus on I think I have a cat visitor trying to get in the room. We tend to focus on the practical, the material success, right? We can see this. This is how our modern society is built. This is what we value. We tend to value material wealth. That's a sign of success, we seem to think, right? But when you dig a little deeper, the reasons I feel that we want this or we crave this material, practical security are because it comes our emotions, right? It's connected to our emotional security. Because if we feel like we are managing, if we are materially successful, we feel like that will help us be emotionally secure. I think we're beginning to wake up to the fact, some of us are well awake to the fact, that this is not necessarily the case, that you can't have such an imbalance, right? There has to be a balance of these two things, of our emotional and practical security. You can't really have one, you can't favor one to the exclusion of the other. So that's the axis of Cancer Capricorn that's really involved in all of this energy that's going on right now. This eclipse that we're having is square to asteroid Eris dwarf planet, in Aries. I've spoken about Eris before. And Eris is also stationing direct. And truthfully, I wasn't really tuned into this until I heard another astrologer, Pam Gregory, speak to this, and it tweaked me. Oh my gosh, yeah, right? I hadn't really thought of that. I hadn't noticed it. So thanks to her. And there's something else I'm going to mention to you later in the video that's thanks to her as well. She's an experienced astrologer and has a lot of insight to offer. So sometimes I check out what she has to say as well. So anyways, Eris is stationing direct at the time. Eris, just a brief recap, is the goddess of chaos and discord, right? In mythology, she was not invited to a particular wedding, an important wedding, and so she felt scorned, and she retaliated, and these events eventually led to the Trojan War. So you can look up the mythology yourself if you're interested, but that's all I'll say about it here. But she's the goddess. We know her as the goddess of chaos and discord. She's very associated with the feminine struggle for survival. And she's that energy of the fierce feminine, right? Who's mad as hell and not going to take it anymore. She represents right rage. So that anger that is warranted. And I've used this phrase before. It's a quote that I borrowed from Randy Buckley. And that's a woman, by the way, who says, "Holy is the anger that leads to our resilience." So that's the energy of Eris. She takes bold action when necessary. She's about standing up and being seen and being heard and being counted. And so the time is ripe for this. Eris moves really, really slowly. She takes over between 500 and 600 years, I can't remember exactly, to circle the zodiac. She's been in the sign of Aries since 1922, and she will remain there until 2044. So there for the long haul. But she's kind of been laying in wait for the opportunity to be noticed and vindicated. That's my take on it anyway. She's kind of saying, right, this square to this energy to this eclipse and to this all this energy in Capricorn. It's like, okay, boys, time to pay the piper, sort of thing. And so we can see this eruptive energy happening all over the world. And we may see that very literally. Uranus, who's also stationing direct on the same day as Eris, is bringing this eruptive energy as well, right? Uranus is in a trine, though, again. So a trine is a more supportive conversation. So Uranus is, let's move on to Uranus a little bit more now. Just after the eclipse on the 10th, Uranus stations direct at 2 degrees of Taurus. So if you have sun, moon, rising, any planets around the 2 degrees Taurus mark, or 2 degrees of the other fixed signs, which is Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius, this Uranus energy will really be in your awareness. Okay, this Uranus stationing direct energy. All of us will feel it, experience it, witness it on some level, but particularly if you have those planetary placements. So Uranus stationing direct is like the alarm clock going off, right? It's like a bazinga sort of thing. It can really amplify the sense of restlessness and impulsiveness that we may already be feeling on some level, but it can really have that impact. It can also liberate us. And seeing as this is in a trine, hopefully that is for, for the better. Liberate us in ways that are really needed, in ways that we're really craving, that are really necessary. But what I will say to you is be wise and stay grounded, at this time in general. This is a lot of big energy going on. Keep your feet on the ground. Don't make any rash moves, any impulsive actions. Just be the witness to all of it and allow things to play out. Respond as necessary. Better to respond than react, right? So you just being here and being aware of what's going on can help you do that. That is one of the beautiful things about astrology. It makes us aware and it allows us to feel a little bit more, I'm not sure about in control. I guess on some level in control. We can't always control, in control of ourselves and our responses. And to kind of get some insight into the bigger picture and how things are playing out, right? So that's Uranus. Then we've got, I still have several things to talk about. So we're definitely getting on to a part 2 of this video, but we've got the Saturn-Pluto conjunction coming to exact at 22 degrees of Capricorn on the 12th, on Sunday. Just like the moon is in her home sign at the time of this eclipse, and around the time of this conjunction, Saturn is in his home sign of Capricorn. And I'm not going to belabor this because we've talked ad nauseum about the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn. This massive restructuring, this breaking down of the old in order to rebuild a stronger foundation, for the future. It is, many themes are playing out here, right? The resistance to this change, this clinging to the old ways, this the breaking down of the patriarchy, but at the same time, many people are clinging to those patriarchal structures, right? But it is this deep, with Pluto there, this deep, profound transformation in the Capricorn area of the chart and in terms of Capricorn related themes. So I'll touch on that when I speak to each sign as well, more specifically. But we've talked a lot about this in the past again, so I'm not going to belabor all the details. What I want to let you know is we also have Mercury in conjunction. I showed you that on the chart. So Mercury, bringing bringing his messages forward, spreading the news, spreading the word, disseminating the information. Over here, over there, right? This kind of thing. Perhaps playing a trick or two over the course of these events. And then we also have asteroid Ceres, I've mentioned to you before, the Earth Mother, Mother Nature, right? That energy of Mother Nature is also there. We see this in what's going on in Australia, for example, with the bushfires. And you know, there are many examples I could pull, but it's not rocket science. Just you have a look at what's going on in the world and you can see the resonance with these events. On the 13th, right after the exact conjunction, the sun will follow suit and will conjunct Saturn and Pluto, right? So the king is holding court. The sun is coming to have a conversation with Saturn and Pluto. As I said to you, this is a story that began over a year ago. It's going to take time to play out. But these few weeks are the climax of this energy, the kind of big bang, and then the crawling out of the aftermath. The earth signs and the water signs are really where this energy is focused, where all of this energy of this week is focused, and these big events. Cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, are really getting impacted, right? Particularly if you have planets points in the last half of the sign, because that's where all of Capricorn energy is really, really centered on. And the last thing I want to say before I end this video and move on to part 2, where I'll go through the signs, is, again, thanks to Pam Gregory, she clued me into something that I hadn't really been paying attention to. I noticed it a while back and then kind of forgotten about it. But this is the fact that Chariclo, right, who in mythology was the wife of Chiron, the wounded healer, she is right there in the mix as all of this is going on. And I learned a little bit about Chariclo when I took a course with Melanie Reinhardt, who literally is one of the people that wrote the book on Chiron. But I took a course with her, and she taught us a little bit about Chariclo, again, wife of Chiron, and she held space, right, for Chiron. She was there kind of quietly working in the background and supporting and witnessing the healing and the wounding. And she is associated with the capacity to kind of see beyond the boundaries of reality. And she can be calm and assured in times of chaos because she can see beyond what's right in front of us. She can see ahead. And on Facebook and Instagram recently, I wrote about this, I shared a Deepak Chopra quote that's sort of one of my go-tos that says all great change is preceded by chaos, right? So I wrote about being in the eye of the storm. And that is very similar to this Chariclo energy, this kind of holding space, being the silent witness, trying to keep our wits about us. And in the eye of the storm is really where the stillness is, and it's where all the power is as well. So if that analogy, if that image helps you, then feel free to borrow it. But I'm going to leave this video here, and I'm going to move on into part 2 to talk about how this is playing out through each of the signs. Okay, so stay tuned and join me in part 2. Take care. Bye-bye.